It's good. You know, you kept me awake last night, Kristen. We got home around 12:30, and I went right to bed, but Kathy stayed up, and she was watching some video. So I'm in bed, and, she's having trouble with her ears. So I'm in bed, and all of a sudden, I think, what's Kristen Tucker doing in my dining room? And why is she yelling? But thank you. I think it was good. There are some things that I pledge I will never, ever do. I will never, ever... Hey, that shouldn't be on there, should it? Oops. Okay. I will never, ever rob a bank, or even a convenience store for that matter. I will never, ever cheat on my wife, Kathy. Never, ever. I will never, ever become addicted to drugs or alcohol or anything else. I will just never, ever, ever do those things. And I'll bet you have a list of your own never-evers as well. These are things that I will never, ever do. But what I want to talk with you about tonight is this. What happens when you do the unimaginable and you step across that line that you were never, ever, ever going to step across? And you do it. You have an affair. You get caught borrowing money from your boss to pay these gambling debts that got out of control. You were driving and you hit a pedestrian and you were under the influence. How do you ever come back from something like that? Or is life just over? How do you ever find forgiveness? How do you ever find life again? Is it possible in any way to be restored? How can that happen? I want to look with you today at a story about Peter. And it's a story in John chapter 21 about Peter who had been through that. He had done the unimaginable. After bragging that he would never, ever, ever fall away from Jesus Christ, he did it. And not only did he do it, he did it 3 times, and not only 3 times, but he did it with oaths and swears to make sure people got the point. I don't know him. How do you ever come back from something like that, huh? How do you ever come back from it? Well, when Jesus rose from the dead, I'm sure Peter was happy about it. But he also, along with being happy about it, he also wondered, but now what for me? I'm glad Jesus is alive, but what am I going to do? Because I certainly can't go back to work with Jesus because I'm sure I'm fired from that job. And what do I do now? 3 years prior to this, Jesus had called him to become a fisher of men, and Peter had done it. He had left everything he knew. He was a fisherman. He left it all behind, and he followed Jesus, and for 3 years now, he's been walking with Jesus. And he's thought that he was pretty good at it. But now all of a sudden, he is a total failure, and he knows it. And so what is he going to do? He doesn't know what to do. And so he decides, well, I guess I guess I'll go back to doing what I used to do before I met Jesus, and that is fishing. So he decides that he's going to go fishing. How does that turn out? Well, here's the story. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but his disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. And then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. You know, I've always wondered when I read this story why they didn't figure this out a little sooner. I mean, they'd been with him all that time, and this is not the first time Jesus pulled this trick. He had done it before. This is how he called Peter to be a disciple the first time. This very way, by having him catch a miraculous catch after all night of catching nothing. So you'd think he would have caught on. Why didn't they? And we're not really given many clues, but here's what I think. I think Peter was so not expecting it. There is no way that Jesus is going to ask me to be a disciple again. There is no way that Jesus is going to call me again. So I'm not even going to think about it. That's the last thing I would expect is for Jesus to come calling. And so he doesn't recognize it. So what happens next? As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. I imagine that fishing all night and catching nothing was very disappointing and discouraging. I expect that the disciples were not having a good night. They were probably blaming each other. There was probably finger pointing, some name calling, and a lot of bitter words. And I imagine that especially for Peter, it was a hard night because he had already sort of given up on the fishing for men thing, and now he can't even fish. And so what good is he? If he can't do the new job, he can't do the old job, what can he do? He can do nothing. And he is so upset and so discouraged until until John says to him, it's the Lord. And then Peter jumps into the water. He is so eager to see Jesus. You know, one thing I think is really strange here, this isn't the first time that Peter got out of a boat in open water to get to Jesus. This is the 2nd time that I know of. The first time, he actually walked on the water. This time, I think he went down. And he maybe swam, or maybe it was shallow, and he waded to shore. But But at any rate, he didn't wait for the other disciples, and he didn't wait for the fish. You know, all night long, what were they hoping for? They were hoping for this big catch of fish, and they didn't get it, and they're disappointed. And then suddenly, Jesus speaks, and boom, here's this huge catch of fish. They say so many and so heavy that this group of strong disciples is not able, doesn't have the strength to pull the net into the boat. They have to drag it along behind the boat. And now they have what they wanted, what they were looking for all night, and they suddenly don't care. And isn't that the way of it? You know, we know what we think we want. You know, if I can get this job, if I can get this amount of income, if I can get to this place, if, then my life will be good. And we get there and we recognize, you know, this wasn't it. This just wasn't it. And Peter recognizes right away, I don't want that. I want Jesus. I want a relationship with Jesus. That's what matters. That's what I'm after. And so he is so eager for that he jumps out of the boat and he swims or wades or whatever to get to Jesus. And then he is so eager, it seems, to please Jesus, that when Jesus says, why don't you go get some fish for breakfast, Peter goes over, and remember that net of fish that's too heavy for all the disciples together to pull into the boat? Well, what does Peter do? He goes and he grabs that net by himself, 153 large fish in it, so imagine what that weighed, and he drags the whole thing by himself to Jesus, and like a puppy, you know, Jesus, look what I brought you. He is so eager to please. And yet, you know, it didn't matter to Jesus that Peter brought the net. It didn't matter. You can't haul a big enough net to Jesus to say, here, Jesus, look what I did for you. There is no way that you can say, here, Jesus, here. You know, maybe Peter was feeling guilty. And he wants to show Jesus, look, this is how sorry I am. This is how much I care. It didn't matter. It didn't matter how big the net was. It didn't matter how many fish were in it. You know, Jesus was the one who was fishing for Peter. And that's right. And he's also fishing for you. And you can't bring him a present that will make him like you better. He likes you already. So what happens next? Well, Jesus doesn't say anything to Peter until after breakfast. And then he gets one-on-one with Peter. And this is what he says. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Now, there's several things going on in this verse that I want to point out to you. And the first one is, notice the name that Jesus uses to call him. He doesn't call him Peter. He calls him Simon. Now, Simon was Peter's old name. That was the name that he had before he had met Jesus. And it meant pebbles, little rocks. And when Jesus met him, Jesus said to him, I'm going to give you a new name. And with that, I'm going to give you a new character. You're not going to be pebbles anymore. You're going to be Peter, which means rock, big rock, solid, steady. This is it. You're the rock, Peter. And as time went on, Peter actually began to believe that he was the rock. I am the rock. And listen, Jesus, you may think that, we're going to fall away from you. Well, the other guys might, but I'm the rock, Jesus. And the rock don't fall. The rock is steady. But he did fall. And now Jesus begins to call him not rock, but pebbles. And I imagine that kind of hurt. But Peter had begun to think that he had earned the name, that he had made himself the rock. And that's dangerous. And for you and I, whenever we begin to think that our skills and our abilities are our gift to God instead of his gift to us, we're going to fall just like Peter did. And so Peter falls, thinking that he had something that he had done for Jesus. I am the rock. Well, the rock is what Jesus had made him, not what Peter had made him. The next thing I want to point out to you is the word these. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? What are these? It's not clear, is it? One thought is that when Jesus said these, he was sort of pointing over at the net full of fish. Peter, do you love me more than these fish? After all, you had decided that you were going to go back to fishing. What is it that you are interested in, really? Do you want to follow me, or do you want to, and go fishing for men again? Or do you want to fish for fish? What's your love in life? What are you going to do? Perhaps that's what Jesus was referring to, or perhaps Jesus was referring to the other disciples that were there. And he was saying, Peter, do you love me more than these other guys love me? Because after all, it was just a few days ago you claim you did. We were in that upper room, remember? And you said, the other guys might fall away, but I won't because I'm super disciple. So I won't, even if they do. Well, what do you think now? Do you still think that you love me more than they love me? Where are you on that now? And then the next thing I want to point out about this verse is the word love, because, in the English language, we just have the one word, love, and we overuse it for everything. I love pizza. I love my wife. I love you guys. Even those of you I don't know your name. I love you guys. I love the Dodgers. I do. But I don't love them all in the same way, do I? Now, in Greek, and the disciples and Jesus, they were speaking Greek, they have a lot of words for love. So that's a little more expressive. Some of them are these. Eros, that's sexual love. This is the love you have for your spouse. And then there's philos, which means friendship. And then there was a word that began to be used in New Testament times and in the New Testament, and that was this word agape, which means this unconditional, complete sort of love. When Jesus says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, eros and philos don't really cut it, do they? This is something way, way beyond that. It's more than my love for the Dodgers. It's more than my love for pizza. It's something far beyond this. And you need a special word for it. And that word is agape. Now, when we look at this verse, Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Agape. Do you agape me? Do you have this unconditional, perfect love for me, even more than these? And Simon replies, and he said, yes, Lord, you know I'm your bud. He uses the word philos. You know I'm your buddy. Now, here is the wonderful thing about Jesus' mercy and grace is that even with that, even though Peter has failed him, even though he has washed out as a disciple, even though his love is so imperfect and he can't even exchange with Jesus the word agape, even so, Jesus says to him, feed my lambs. It's okay, he said, you know, you're my bud, and I have a place in my family for you. There's a place at the table for you. I have something for you to do, and I'm going to give that to you as a gift. You may feed my lambs. What mercy is that, right? Next verse. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Agape me. And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I'm your bud. Same thing. But again, Jesus, in grace and mercy, says to him, all right, we'll go with that. But I have a place in my kingdom for you. I have a place in my family for you. I have something for you to do. Will you take care of my sheep? Amazing, huh? But then we come to verse 17. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Now, why is Peter hurt? Well, I can think of two reasons that he was hurt. First of all, he was hurt because Jesus asked him 3 times, and Peter had denied him 3 times. Have you ever been caught doing something wrong? I mean, so that you can't deny it. You can't say, oh, no, I didn't really do that. You know, you are caught red-handed. And Peter is at this point caught red-handed, and he thinks, he knows what I did, and he knows how many times I did it. You know, he sees right through me, and that hurts. But another reason that Peter is hurt here is because Jesus changed the question. Jesus didn't use the word agape this time. He used the word philos. Simon, he says, are you my bud? And Peter, he says, you know everything, because he knows you see right through me. And he says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I'm your bud. And Peter knows he can't say agape now. Jesus can see right through him. Jesus knows what he has. And that's what Peter says. You know me. You know all things. You're looking right through me. And you know what I feel for you. So I can't lie about it. It won't work. You know what I have for you. You know I'd like more, but this is all I got. I'm your friend. Please, Jesus, understand that. I'm your friend. And Jesus says, yeah, okay. Okay, buddy, but there's room at my table for you. Feed my sheep. I have something for you. Wow. Amazing. But now, Jesus gets really personal. And he says to him this, he says, very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, follow me. Wow. So Jesus predicts here that this friendship that they've got going is going to be a costly friendship. And he said, I'm going to let you know that as a result of this, you are going to die a terrible death. And we know from history that Peter was hung upside down on a cross, and that's how he was killed. And so it's going to be hard. But here's what I want to ask you. Here's my challenge. Here's my invitation. Knowing that, will you follow me? How would you respond? Well, I'll tell you how Peter responds. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, Lord, who is going to betray you? This is John. He's the one who's writing this, but he doesn't identify himself as the author. He just calls himself, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And when Peter saw him, he asked, hey, Lord, what about him? Oh, how human. Because that's what I want to say, right? Okay, this is going to cost me, but here's Mr. Agape over here. What's going to happen to him? What does he get? Because if I'm going to die like this, he must have it really bad because I only like you and he loves you, so what's going to happen to him? Or because he loves you, is he going to get it off easy? I don't know. What is it going to be? And Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. In other words, none of your business. What happens between John and I is between John and I. And we're not talking about John now. We're talking, you and me. This is between you and me, Peter. I'll talk to John later. But right now, my invitation is to you. Will you follow me? Now, this story speaks to me, first of all, of God's great love and his wonderful mercy, that he has a place in his kingdom for you, even when you've messed up, even when you've done the unthinkable, even when you think you have done something so awful, so terrible, you could never come back. Jesus has a place in his family for you. Amen. And he is inviting you to come and fulfill that place, to feed his sheep, to feed his lambs, to follow him. He's asking you, just you. This isn't between anybody else tonight. It's between Jesus and you. And he says, I have agape for you. What you have for me, well, we'll let that grow. But I have agape for you. The other thing this talks about, though, is the cost of discipleship. Because Jesus lets him in on the fact that this is not going to be easy. And he says, following me will pinch a bit. And it will hurt. And it's not going to end pleasantly. But knowing that, I still give you this invitation. Will you follow me? And tonight, Jesus is giving that invitation to each one of you. Will you follow me no matter where it leads, no matter how it ends, no matter what happens, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether somebody else gets better than you or gets worse than you, it doesn't matter. Will you follow me no matter what? And tonight we're going to be invited to come and receive communion. What's that all about? It's about Jesus' invitation. He's saying, follow me. There is a place at my table for you, and you can be a part of my family, and I'm proving that to you because here is my body and here is my blood. But watch out, because what are we receiving? Broken body and spilled blood. And watch out, because you might get crucified. But here's my invitation. Will you, even if that happens, will you follow me? And that's what I want to invite you to do today. To open your heart to Jesus. He's inviting you, he's speaking only to you, and he's saying, will you, no matter what, will you follow me? And he's asking, do you love me? And your answer is, in some ways, a little bit irrelevant, isn't it? It's about following. It's not about being there yet, that I can say, oh yeah, I'm the greatest disciple ever, because you know how that works. It's about you're the greatest. You're the greatest Lord ever. You're the greatest master ever. And I will do whatever. I'll jump out of a boat to get to you. Let me pray for you. Will you pray with me? And maybe there are some of you here tonight who have done the unimaginable, and you're wondering if you can ever be restored, and you're at that point where your life is so broken, you don't know, and you think, I've blown it so badly, I can never, ever be accepted. But Jesus says otherwise. And he's inviting you tonight to come and receive from him and to sit at his table and to be a part of his family forever. He's inviting you. But are you accepting? And will you come? And will you say yes? He has something for you to do. He has sheep for you to feed. Will you come? Lord, we pray in your name, give us the strength to say yes. Amen.